Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in for episode 38. We'll dive right into it. A ton to cover this week in this week's podcast. And so greatly appreciate you guys listening on Spotify or iTunes or watching this live on YouTube. We're going to review the week, talk about how much profit we made. We'll look at our year-to-date units as well. We're going to talk about NCAA basketball. The process for handicapping is very important to have a process when you're handicapping. Are you going to use just model? Are you going to use model line movement, etc.? Because if you don't have a process, that will create doubt and will make it very difficult to pull the trigger. I'm going to show you some specific examples that relates to NBA as well. And we will talk about the love-hate relationship that I have with soccer. We started wagering soccer again, now 1-2 on Saturday, but I do believe this model that we have is going to be extremely profitable. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, it's going to be the theme of this podcast is the process for handicapping. Have to have a process for handicapping. All right, let's review the week. We'll look at the betting log here first for year to date. Let me pull this up. And we were actually dollar-wise down slightly. We lost, as far as dollar-wise, 1/3 unit, which wasn't bad. Which I think I paid out minus 337 this morning to my mover. I use a mover. So not bad, but you combine all the last 3 weeks, we've been extremely profitable dollar-wise. So excited about that. Now, if you look at the year-to-date unit-wise, we're sitting at 49.18. I really haven't wagered NHL nor NFL. The only play we had at NFL yesterday, we had the Chargers last night. We had them. Although they covered, they still lost. I didn't play it, but if I would have played it, I would have played it on the money line. NFL still extremely difficult, and I doubt we'll wager anymore, considering it's so late in the season. Up 3.36 units. I'll pull up that log here. 18-18, 3.36 units. So super proud of our progress there. Let's take a look at NCAA basketball. I haven't wagered since 12/4. Basically didn't wager much. I think that was like Monday, and I'm going to dive back into that. And one of the reasons why I halted with NCAA basketball, I want to have a process for handicapping NCAA basketball. I don't really feel like I have one yet, but I think I have created one, but currently 7-4, up 2.69 units there. And then soccer, we started back wagering. We actually went 2-2 with the actual wagers that we wagered, down, but actually down a couple units. You can see here on the right, had some heavy juice plays, which I'm debating whether or not that's the right decision or not. But let's talk about soccer. The model, and this goes into what I really want this focus of this podcast to be about, having a process for handicapping. You have to have a process for handicapping so that when you get to the point where you're ready to make that wager, you have to have what I call a trigger point, because without a trigger point, it's going to be very difficult to, quote, pull the trigger. And what I mean by trigger point, so if you say, all right, let's say if you do what I do, use a model and you're going to use some line movement and you're going to handicap some situational angle. Situational angle, I count line movement as a situational angle. You might count form, which means you generally don't want to play a bad team. Maybe that team's only won 2 of their last 5. So, how many, quote, let's say you have value via the model and you have, out of the 3 situational angles you look at, they have 1 situational angle moving against them and 2 situational angles in their favor. Are you going to play that or not play that? So what I'm saying is you have to have a process, and generally a really good process for those of you that have models. And the way I do it, and basically the way I started is I use line movement as a trigger point, and I'll show you that when we talk about NCAA basketball. So you look at a game, hey, do we have value? And then the trigger point would be, does line move in our favor? And let's dive into that, looking at this this was from 12/7, if you're looking on the screen here, for NCAA basketball. Now, what's interesting, going through some numbers, plays via the model that had value, and this is not factoring any line movement, just playing home teams. This was from 12/7, so I think that was Saturday. Yeah, that was a big sample size. We had 26 plays via the model that had value. It went 16-10. And remember about home teams. Home teams win 75% of the time in NCAA basketball. That doesn't mean they cover. Does not mean they cover. That means the home team wins. However, with the model, if you're playing a quote home team, so we already know we have value via the model, and if they're home, we know there's a 75% chance that they win. Majority of teams that win also cover. So that's one way to approach it. Now, this is interesting. That same day, if you take home and away plays, really good day for the model. The model went 21-11, factoring no line movement. That means just looking at all the plays with value, it went 21-11. Now, the problem with this is an interesting point, is that when you have that many games, it's very difficult to figure out how you're going to wager that in real dollars. Here's what I mean. So if you have, like, let's say you have $1,000 bankroll, right? And that's probably normal for most people that are sort of recreational betting this. At 26, look at the home side, at 26 games, I mean, even if you wager $100 a unit, you got 20, you don't have enough money to do that, right? So you have to figure out a way to do that. And there's a lot of different ways. One particular way you could do was just divide up, like, risk no more than $200. So you're going to risk no more than 20% of your bankroll. Even though that's $200, and let's say you only have $1,000 bankroll, the reason I think that would be okay to do that is considering the amount of volume that you have. So if you have 26 plays, so you would take 300. I hate this new iPhone update. 300 divided by 26, and you're going to wager $10 a play. So that's one way to do it. So you don't want to risk more than 20% of the bankroll. And it's not like you have 3 plays and you go over 3 and you lose 20% of your bankroll. You're not going to lose 20% of your bankroll with that amount of volume. Meaning, like, even if you had a really bad day, like it went 10-16. So if it goes, let's say it went opposite of that, it went, instead of 16-10, let's say it goes 10-6, 10-16. So you're down basically minus 6.6 units with juice. That would only be $66 lost. Does that make sense? So when you have an extreme amount of volume like this, one way to do it is just say, hey, I'm not going to risk no more than 20% of my bankroll. So again, I actually did that wrong, y'all. I used $300. My bad. So we take $200 divided by 26, and we're basically wagering $7.69 a play. So basically $8 a play. And that's one way to do it. So that way, the total amount you would have risk would be roughly $200. And even for me, that's a similar way to do it. Although if you had a significant bankroll, let's say you had, $10,000 bankroll minimum, you could wager $100 a unit there. So then you would only have, at $2,600 total, you would have, a little bit more than 20% of your bankroll at risk, if that makes sense. Now, when I was looking at this to try to reduce that number down and still be profitable, because again, the best way, again, treating this like a business, you want to wager the least amount you can with the biggest ROI. So what I did was I thought, was there a way that we can narrow this down and still be profitable? And if you look over there to the right, let's see, let me pull this up. Yep. It says 16-9 with line movement. So what I did was I looked at every single play, both home and away. And what's interesting to note, remember about away teams in NCAA basketball, they still cover roughly 50% of the time. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the books know that the home team wins at a very high percentage. So a lot of times that home side, they shade the line to that side. If you don't know what the word shade means, it means basically they inflate that side. So it's not a, quote, true number. So if they inflate the home side, where's the value? The value is over on the away side. So instead of a line being maybe -4, they make it -6. So you get, quote, 2 extra points of value on the away side. So now I'm going to show you how I interpret line movement here, and it is pretty good. You could almost, I'll give you guys a tip. You could almost run NCAA basketball top down, and that means just using line movement itself. Because I've noticed here after we're into December, the line movement is pretty sharp. So I'm at bookmakersreview.com, and you may have seen me do this before. but it's a really good review. And we'll just look at these first couple games here. Take a look at Maine and Fordham, and look at this opening line. And I want to explain this. What this is this is a generic opening line. So what they do is they take all of the opening lines for all these books: Bet Online, Bovada, Bookmaker, which is a sharp book, Heritage, UWager, they have Pinnacle in there as well, and then they average those opening lines and give a generic opening line. The reason I think that's good is a good opening line to use is because you don't want to look at a quote sharp opening line, because it could be different. You want to be able to see like where the quote public opening line is, so that you're able to actually see the line move from opening to close. And books don't move a line unless they move a line to decrease the liability. So meaning like this is a very practical way to do it. And you often hear handicappers say to get the best line, a lot of handicappers play the opening line, a lot of sharps that have their model. I don't personally do that, but it would make sense that if from opening line is different than the closing line, then you just simply play the line movements. In a very simple way, it makes it very easy to pull the trigger. Like this Maine Fordham, it opened at 5, it stayed at 5, and we'll just use the closing line of Bookmaker. So what we've learned from Bob McCune, the way he taught me, was from his books, if there's no line movement, it favors the favorite. So in this case, Fordham, it opens at 5, closes at 5, and Fordham won that game 87-72. Let's look at Oklahoma State and Seton Hall. The next game, it opens as a pick, moves a 1.5 in favor of Oklahoma State, so it closes at 1.5. Oklahoma State wins that one. Let's take a look at this big one here, Richmond and Auburn. This line opened at 27. It closes at 29.5. So 29.5, and so it moves against Richmond in favor of Auburn. Auburn wins and covers. So there's 3 in a row there, just on the line. Look at Maryland and Purdue. This line opens at 3 for Purdue. It closes at 4. So that would be a play in favor of Purdue. Purdue wins and covers. So that's a very simple way to interpret line movement. It takes all the subjectivity out. And of course, the other way you can look at line movement is you look at it late. Let me see if I can pull this up. And sharp movement is late and subtle. Let's go down here, look at Pinnacle. And you can see this must have been a noon game. So somewhat subtle at 10:17, an hour before it tipped off, this line moved from 4 up to 4.5. So that's the, I guess, more sharp approach to looking at line movement. But overall, the way I described it or showed you here earlier, that's a very simple way. Just look at the opening line movement and then compare that with the closing line of Bookmaker. And then, of course, doing it here with the model combined makes it extremely sharp. So doing that for Saturday, it does reduce our games. So we got 25 games instead of 26, or instead of 32 with the home and away. So that went 16-9 with line movement. I checked this for yesterday. It went 2-3. So overall, it'd be profitable those last 2 days. So again, that's an example of having a process. So we look for teams with value via the model. And then the second step, or the trigger point, is basically using the open and close. So if we have positive line movement, it's a play. If we don't, it's a pass. Very simple. Okay. Now I do want to talk about, I don't think I can pull up the model for soccer. We'll pull up the log here. I know what I can do. Let me go to Flash Score. It's not going to do it. Anyway, I'll just talk about it. Let me go back to soccer. All right. What's interesting about soccer, and this is real positive, on Friday when I gave out, so there's several ways that I think this model is the best model I've ever come up with. And on Friday, and this is using differential, meaning the way you calculate their goals. On Free Fridays, we had Stuttgart minus 127, Atlanta plus 112. Both of those teams won. So 2-0. Then the next day, which was the actual day I started wagering, we go 1-2. Not bad. Now, what's interesting, I did post this on Instagram. I can pull it off of here and just sort of walk you through this. Okay, now yesterday we had 6 plays that had a differential of 3 or greater, which again is the trigger point, okay? So Bournemouth was a 4-point goal diff favorite. They win. Chelsea, a 4-point goal diff favorite. They win. Marseille from the French league, a 5-point goal differential. They win. Lazio had a match against Napoli. They were huge dogs, plus 369 dogs. They were a 4-point differential. At plus 369, they win 1-0. And then I can't even pronounce this team, Utrecht from the Netherlands. They were a 6-point goal differential favorite. They win. So we're 5-0. Last match, and again, this was heavy juice. ATL Madrid was minus, I think, was it 371? It was way high. They were a 6-point differential. They win. So if you take all of the entire weekend, we go 2-0, 1-2, and 6-0, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that was 9-2. So I really think that this, and that's factoring no line movement at all. And again, you can use line movement, you can not use line movement. It depends on how strong that model is or how much confidence you have. And it basically just comes down to testing. And I think with soccer, because the total amount of goals scored in soccer is 2.5. So you're going to have a ton of variance. You'll have a lot of upsets. And I think this differential way, and I'm going to start tracking it, might be just the way to play it in general. And obviously we'll have days like we did on Saturday. And then I'll have to make a decision. Am I going to play juice? Am I not going to play juice? Because especially if we have some of these dogs, it would to some degree balance that out. But yeah, I'm excited about this model. I think it can definitely be the way to go moving forward. All right. Well, anyway, that's a wrap here for the podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll have a ton of content coming this week. I got a lot of videos I'm going to make, and we're going to talk about juice and how it affects your win ratio. So that'll be a video you can look forward to. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Peace.